Xenoblade 2, Bringer of Chaos difficulty, we're starting Chapter 3, let's not delay. The chapter starts with us checking in with Torna, as Malos and Jin have just made it back to what seems to be their base. Here, we get introduced to another member, the overly egotistical and analytical Akos, and his blade Abrona, who tends to be very sarcastic in nature, and also very annoying. Few people are brave enough to like this thing, and those that do are never the same again. Akos mentions two other members, but we only get the name of Mikhail, who is my personal favorite member, but we don't need to dwell on that because Abrona is somehow able to pinpoint our location, us being Rex, and Akos is even able to deduce that we're on our way out of Gormott. At the same time, they notice a shipment of core crystals heading off to Indal, and Jin says that he'll deal with the core crystals himself, while Malos and Akos focus on the Aegis. Jin wants to know the whereabouts of Nia, which Akos also has the location of, or more specifically Dromark. Jin tells Akos to do whatever he wants with that information, which I imagine Akos interprets as kill, destroy, murder. Malos tells Jin not to do anything reckless, but it's far too late for that. From here, we go ahead and check in with the Aegis gang, where Red shows off a sort of Cloud Sea map that changes depending on the date, as it seems many of the major titans sort of orbit the world tree like planets. Pyrus says the current date is a Mathatober 5th, 4058, so sorry to anyone that wants a blade of their own, you'll have to wait a couple thousand years yet. Rats inputs the date and it shows off the current placement of most titans, and Gormott is conveniently the closest to the world tree it seems, at least of the titans that likely make predictable movements. It's weird and questionable, but that doesn't matter because we need a ship to the world tree. But the town isn't an option because the Ardanian government likely having the town on lockdown to some extent. And Grabs obviously can't help us, but Tora knows of a Titan shipbuilder near the back of the Titan known as Uman, who is an old friend of his grandfather. We leave the cutscene for a mini cutscene where they quickly talk about Cloud Sea tides and how they can affect or even restrict going to some areas, but honestly it's only a thing on two Titans as far as I remember, and neither one are all that bad. Gameplay time now, and like all good gacha players, I decide to do my daily dose of soul selling, pulling 1 core on Rex and 2 on Nia. Rex gets a fire shield hammer that's far inferior to Kohana, our water katana that we got at the end of last episode, and then we have Nia's pulls. Yeah, I'm not about to force you to watch that. Nobody deserves to be put through that. Yeah, she got Korra, which honestly is still probably the best rare blade option for Nia that we've gotten so far, but there is no Bringer of Chaos challenge interesting enough to make me use her. Besides, the next blade we pull is the same weapon type with an earth element, so welcome the Earth Knuckle Claw Suzu to our starting lineup for the time being. Her skills aren't particularly great on their own, though for our purposes, high-speed preparation is actually decent enough. The main reason for using her over, say, Korra is that it pairs a lot better with our current blade setup of Poppy's Earth element and Pyra's Fire element, and Nia's Knuckle Claw kit also gives us access to one of the best launch arts in the game, which is nice since that can help a little bit with damage output, though launch is also a bit strange with how it functions sometimes. I take control of Nia, and my first order of business is actually to head back to the hangar of the Ardanian battleship, as there's a couple things to clean up here, and to do so, we grab the Senior Officer's Key, which allows us to access the majority of the ship, if not all of it. For the time being, though, I only had the brain juices to lead me to do one thing, which is open up the prison cells where Dromark was being held. This lends us to an admittedly not that good chest, and our third unique monster, level 14 Remorseful Vaclav. Ultimately speaking, this fight isn't too different from any other regular Ardanian soldier, but being on Bringer of Chaos means he has a ton of health and does a decent bit of damage. I don't have any super unique strategy for it or anything, but controlling Nia now, my general plan is to regularly swap from Dromark's larger healing output and break art over to Suzu for a more offensive play and her launch art. Truth be told, I don't think I had equipped a core chip to Suzu, which was probably not very smart, but honestly, Dromark doesn't have a very good core chip either, so it's not a big deal. Tor gets fairly low in the later half of this fight, but admittedly speaking, it wasn't all that hard otherwise. That said, this is the last easy unique monster of the entire game in my opinion, which we'll see later in this video. I head back to the Traveler's Resting Tree and pull another blade on Rex, but it's still way worse than Johanna and Hani, the unnamed core crystal we got in the second episode, despite being a dark katana. I begin my trek to the left side of the Gormati Titan, bullying a monkey in the process, but before I can reach our destination, I forget something incredibly important about this area. Level 18 Sniping Brent is the next unique monster of the game, with a fairly large sightline for an enemy not in Xenoblade 1, and this fucker loves to spam this annoying AoE attack. Even on normal difficulty, this guy can be a pain in the neck to beat, so beating it at level 14 on Bringer of Chaos is going to be nigh impossible without DLC or very specific blades. After dying, I attempt to head back down Melnath's shoulder, which, by the way, as a side note, this landmark implies that the name of the Titan is Melnath, so I'll be saying it that way for the rest of the video, maybe series if I remember, but I wouldn't count on it. Anyway, I head down the shoulder again, but I still want to fight a couple enemies because why not? But I accidentally alert this scout Turkin that I wasn't really sure which way it went, and yeah, he do be running. I lose the fight because I was being overly cautious about the roaming F-16 fighter jet in the area, and at this point I decide to quit out of the game for some reason. Probably food, I don't know. Except I forgot to save, so I lost a small bit of progress. Thankfully, the game autosaves every time you pull a blade, so you can't cheat the system without paying the NSO Cloud Saves DLC. So the only real progress I lost was some dodo bullying and a couple of landmarks locations. The enemies I want to fight are this pair of drivers, not for any real good reason or specific drops, though part of me did kind of hope that they might drop core crystals, but mainly just because drivers are always the most interesting enemy type to fight in my opinion, and also the most frustrating, especially any twin ring drivers like this Dinesh driver is. Think of them a lot like Dromark, plenty of healing but on a smaller scale because that's what enemies get for having 100 times more health than we do. The biggest things to note with twin ring drivers are Ripple Drive and Dual Fang, both of which have surprisingly good AoE and seem to be heal on hit arts, which can be nasty to deal with even if they don't heal all that much. The other driver here uses an axe weapon, which I'd say the biggest concern here is Axe Break, which has a small AoE that inflicts taunt. Not incredibly dangerous on its own, but it can make prioritizing more healing-based enemies a challenge to do. Thankfully in this fight, Nia never actually gets taunted herself, so I always manage to have at least someone making sure the healer can't recover too much of their own health. The Dennis driver goes down, and then I quickly manage to take down the Volskaya driver. Though only the second one ends up dropping a core crystal. Heading further down the shoulder, I decide to detour slightly to do one of those quests that, once I know it exists, I can't really imagine doing a playthrough where I don't complete it, because just knowing what happens makes it hard to ignore. The starting TLDR is that a couple of lovebirds are being attacked by a group of 4 Turkin, and we're going to do something to interfere to make sure they don't die. 4 enemies can be very intimidating though, but thankfully having control of Nia makes this not so bad. This is a good time to talk about what I consider to be Dromark's best special, his level 2 special. It's almost identical to Ripple Drive on enemy twin rings, being an AoE heal on hit art, and it's incredibly good in fights with 3 or more enemies. That sort of thing doesn't happen all that often in the story, but it's nice to have occasionally anyway, even against single target enemies, when her other 2.5 specials don't have the greatest effects in the world, I think. I don't actually remember what her level 4 special does. This fight isn't particularly difficult otherwise though, so we finish it relatively painlessly thanks to Dromark. We talk to Rhiannon, who is concerned about her fiancé Norman, who was injured something fierce by the Turkin. They mention they had to elope because her father rejected their true love due to some Ardanians having once nearly wiped out Rhiannon's ancestors. Which, sure, that's messed up, but dude, it's already 40:58, I think it's time to move on. She wants to get Norman some medicine from our brother Nils, who happens to be an apothecary back in Torgoth. We need to get some shepherd's purses and dawn hydrangeas for the medicine, but we already have those, so I don't need to go on a wild goose chase trying to collect them. We head over to Nils, who tells us a little bit more about the family, namely that he was disinherited for studying medicine in Mor Ardain, and that while the dad is a stubborn fool, the mom is more accepting, but generally doesn't go against her husband. Would not be surprised if there's some light domestic abuse going on here, though at the same time I also doubt it. Anyway, we go talk to the mom and dad, but not before Nia decides to go for a deep dive, and then talking to Kral, an Ardadian soldier having an extreme panic attack after the ruckus we caused in town. There's no real reason to talk to him, but it can be fun. We talk to Carrie, or at least that's how I've decided to interpret this name, the mother of Nils and Rhiannon, and tell her about the eloping, who proceeds to tell her husband Devin about it, who initially acts a bit concerned, but quickly puts on his anger face and more or less disinherits her, saying someone who associates with an Ardanian is no daughter of his. He can't see reason, no matter what Carrie says, and he has nothing to say to us, so we head back over to Nils to grab the medicine, and then take it over to Rhiannon to give to Norman. This is one of, if not the only, quest in the game with a branching path that has a relatively major effect on the world. After Norman recovers, you have the option to tell them what all happened in Torgoth with their parents, or to keep quiet about it. If you tell them what happened, they'll head back to Torgoth and live their lives there, even gaining some semblance of approval from her father. However, if you care slightly about getting more rewarded later down the line, you'll want to keep quiet about everything, and they'll go through with the elopement as planned. This is what I decide to do, but I also don't remember what the reward they give you later on is, so whether or not this is worth throwing a father down a hateful and depressing rest of his life is up in the air for now. And no, I don't want to be told what the reward is, that would spoil the surprise. With the quests done, we explore the shoulder a little bit more, as there's a certain thing around here that I felt like doing. After a bit of reminding myself how to go around this area, we make it up to the first heart-to-heart I'll be viewing, though I should mention this is technically the third we could have viewed at this point. This heart-to-heart gives us a little bit of an explanation as to why Cloud Sea tides are a thing and how they work, which the TLDR is that the Cloud Sea is sometimes flat and sometimes fluffed up, like actual clouds in the sky. After Rex finishes explaining this, Poppy says she has a ton of questions, and you have the option as Tor to tell her not to bother Rex, or to ask Dromark instead, since he's so much wiser than Rex. Dromark immediately tosses the responsibility to Azurda, saying that because he was awakened by Nia, Dromark couldn't possibly more than the ancient titan in our group. Gramps is not pleased, and references the ever-so-classic little kid question, where do babies come from? Dromark says that if she asks that, just say that a flying Turkin delivers babies. Now, why he chose Turkin instead of any other birds that we've actually seen do the flying thing in Xenoblade, I'll never know, but I guess Turkin are technically the most humanoid natures, so I can see them being the best suited for the job, though I'm not entirely convinced they can fly, or that they're actually the best suited for the job. Anyway, Azurda says that quick thinking is why Dromark is better suited to the job. Which, yeah, Azurda has a tendency to not think his life decisions out. Poppy witnesses all of this, though, and says she's now learned what it means when people say passing the buck. A fun little heart-to-heart, but not all that important. I'm also going to take this opportunity that all of the dialogue all the script since we started the Rhiannon quest has been done at 5 in the morning, and that is why I'm stuttering. I grab a quick chest in the nearby vicinity, and then skip travel back to the battleship armory again. There's another quick heart-to-heart here, which we could have viewed back when we were here the first time, but for the sake of non-existent pacing, I decided to skip it at the time. The start of this heart-to-heart has Nia saying that the inside of a Titan battleship is way different from the Monoceros, Torna's black ship that seemed to run without a Titan. Tor seems to know a lot about the tech that the ship uses, and Rex mentions that not all of it is strictly salvaged, which is probably very impressive when it comes to this sort of tech. After a bit of the duo nerding out, Nia asked what Poppy thinks about the conversation. You have the option of saying it's not that bad, and her asking Tor why he's so proud. I ask why he's proud, and Tor mentions that Poppy's general functions use the same technology, just improved upon.
Poppy is surprised!
Nia and Rex accuse Tor of stealing Ardanian tech, but Tor says it's fine because not even Mor Ardain could reverse engineer it. Poppy feels uneasy, but there's no time to dwell on that because we need to re-escape the battleship. I'll be back here eventually since there is other stuff for us to grab, but I forgot about said stuff at this point since I never really bothered to explore this ship all that much. I head back to the shoulder, and we prepare to make actual progress. We go down the shoulder once more, this time doing some more relatively pointless platforming that I think technically can lead us to a chest, but I was too lazy to look for it. A bit of walking and bird watching later, and we finally make it to Uman's shipyard, where we find none other than Uman. Yeah, who would have thought? Anyway, he doesn't recognize Tora at first because he's grown quite a bit in the last year, I guess, which, yeah. Tora is a big old Naban. Not as big as Banner though, but big regardless. Tora tells Uman that he needs to borrow a ship for a quick boaty jaunt, and when questioned about why he didn't take a boat in town, he makes the excuse that he was flat broke on cash that he had to spend to create Poppy, which isn't totally inaccurate, given that he was broke even before then. Uman says that he would lend us a boat, but his current boat isn't finished and he doesn't have the materials needed to fix it. I think we all know where this is going. He needs diamond, oak, and puzzle tree wood. The puzzle tree wood is a random drop from collection points, and I had just enough to not have to worry about stealing from the Notlia timber site again. The diamond oak, on the other hand, was impossible to get before this point, but that's fine because I'd already gotten the skip travel point for the Dawnview Grotto in the last episode, which is where all the diamond oak can be found. Truth be told, I've never really liked this part of the story quest, but that might be largely because I've had multiple playthroughs where I fell off the grotto because skill issues. After grabbing the diamond oaks, I decide to pull a couple more cores on Nia because why not, really? But the only thing of note, or so I thought at first, was this twin rings with attack aura. Twin rings are a weird class, with half the party drivers filling up more of a healing niche with it, excuse me, and the other half being a more damage-oriented kid. However, there's one major problem with Mugen here.
So now we part. It's been an honor.
Yeah, we don't need that around these parts. I head back to Uman's shipyard and turn in the parts, but he's a bad Titan caregiver, so the Titan runs away because tummy rumbly. Uman sends us off to go feed the Titan, who is at Monstrous Spring, but only when the tide is high, so we head to the Toradroth Inn. I level everyone up to 17 because we'll need the levels, and then Pyra tells us she wants to go off to the Forgotten Wastes. You know, that area now inaccessible because of the tides. Before we consider her request, I skip travel to Lashem Island so I can make some sort of detoured swim over to the Titan, because there are some chests to grab on this route that aren't the worst idea to pick up. It's also around sunset in game, which turns the Cloud Sea to a very pretty color, so that's neat. We make it to the Titan, Rex feeds it some pollen orbs, and the Titan goes back to Uman. Before I head back over to Uman, I decide to make a bold decision and attempt to fight Sniping Brent properly, now that I'm nearly the same level as he is. Put simply, I don't even get him down to half health before I die. This piece of garbage spams Feather Vein of Pain so snuffin' often, and it does so much spark and damage. We simply do not have the numbers to beat him at this point, though I promise to give it another try before the next story fight, since I think part of the problem may just be needing to get some better core chips, which we are definitely capable of doing at this point. I change the tide again and head down to the Forgotten Waste to do the heart-to-heart that Pyra told us to do. They reminisce a little bit about something that happened like 2 days ago with how this was the place where Rex and Pyra washed up thanks to Azarda's efforts. He's a little salty about being a small guy now, but this makes it possible for him to travel with us. He mentions that if he were his usual size, he could take us just about anywhere, though because he's old, it would take over twice as long as a normal Titan ship. Pyra says he looks adorable like this, so she prefers it, and Azurda asks Rex his opinion. The options are pretty straightforward, better big or better small. I say better small, and Rex says it's because he feels encouraged with Azurda's emotional support, and that it's nice to be walking around together like they have been. Azurda is happy, but has a few complaints about how cramped Rex's helmet is and how much the helmet jolts around. But Rex says he'll try to get used to keeping it more stable. In return, Azurda says he'll keep up the words of encouragement. But Rex suddenly realizes that he'd rather not have him nagging him all the time, and Nia agrees, saying she would hate for Jomar to be doing that sort of thing. Gramps calls them cheeky sods, and the heart-to-heart ends. Most of these heart-to-hearts are really good and a lot of fun, though some of them tend to be very heavily memed in the community. More on that in the next episode, though. Before I head over to Uman, I decide to try my luck at the next that comes after sniping Brent, level 20 Supercharged Alfonso. This is one of those that are extremely easy to miss if you aren't the explorative type, and it wasn't spawned here until sometime after we made it out of Lower Gormott. We start the fight, and it goes great for the first 10 seconds, and then Alfonso uses electric skin and Nia dies instantly. Well, that sure went well. Even with it being Bringer of Chaos, I didn't expect that, so I take a look and sure enough, Suzu's ether defense is a whopping 5%, which is not great when the goal is to try and survive an attack. I briefly consider using Korra for this fight since she has 30% ether defense, but instead I make the much better decision of making it so Nia's only blade is Dromark, and swap over to Rex for access to Gohanna's evasion art, and because him swapping to Pyra would be a sudden death for him. This fight goes marginally better, but we're still nowhere near capable of taking this thing down as we are now. After Vaclav, the become a pain in the neck to try and fight for a while, but I'll still try and do any that I can before the boss of this chapter. We go back to Uman's shipyard, and my initial plan was to properly strip out this upcoming cutscene, but I think I'm going to end this episode after the cutscene, so have it raw, I guess. Although this is a little sad because I had a lot of Danger Noodle puns to make, essentially.
So that's the World Tree.
Whoa, I've never seen it so close before.
Me neither, to tell you the truth. But it's just as awesome as I'd hoped.
The current's really strong. Fall in that, and you're a goner.
It's great that we made it this far. But how do we get over there? Any ideas? Pyra? Huh?
Rex, we need to leave. We can't stay here.
What? Why? What are you talking about, Pyra?
Ophion!
Ophi who?
Quick!
Huh? Gotcha!
Ophion, stop this. What's wrong? Can't you hear me? It can't be.
What was that? Thought we were done for. Huh? Is that Uriah's Titan? This is not good! Here it comes!